information integrity that enables open access to information, and one that counters online harms and promotes online safety. And on the back of that comes the issues that are also being raised and spoken about today. We are looking at gagging expression. We are looking at a legal perspective of the increasing use of slap suits, the strategic litigation against public participation, and really just what big issues and what key elements we need to be addressing and focusing on in consideration of world press freedom, and one that those conversations should have been happening in Lusaka. And so looking at those issues, I think from our perspective, we want to look at this opportunity as one that enables building solidarity amongst our organizations, to fundamentally recognizing that there is, aside from differences, aside from organization approaches, there is a common element that we all share and brings us here, brings us together today. And it's an opportunity to build on our strengths, to build on our collaboration, and to really celebrate, to not only celebrate the freedoms that we do have, but work towards mitigating where those freedoms are being shut down. So with that, thank you once again. It's a really interesting agenda that we have on for the afternoon. Some brilliant speakers throughout the rest of the program, and so yeah, enjoy. Thank you for being with us. Nicole, I'll hand back over to you.
Thanks very much, Thandi. Can I then ask Gillian, Khadija and Kukhle to please come and join me up front so that we can begin our first panel. I don't, wherever you're comfortable. Hi, Khadija, how are you?
I made it.
So thank you so much to our panelists who really have responded to our cry and call and made themselves available at the last minute to participate. And I think it's a reflection of the importance of the issues we're discussing, that we have been able to convene a panel of this excellence and seniority, as I said, with great time pressures. But we do have an excellent panel. We have Gillian Green, who is the editor of Daily Maverick. We have Khadija Patel, who has been a contributor to a large number of media publications. You'll recognize her byline, but I think for the moment we'll say media executive. And then also delighted to have Kukhle Mavuso, who is a senior associate with Weber Wenzel in the media team. Weber Wenzel has provided assistance to any number of the organizations here and to journalists and media practitioners across South Africa, and are recognized for their expertise. I'm going to ask my panelists, and we're going to keep it really informal, to take 5 minutes or so each, and just to reflect personally on what you're seeing from your specific position in terms of trends and developments around gagging orders in South Africa. Are they accelerating? Are they taking different forms? And so without further ado, Khadija, can I ask you if you're comfortable? And I'll have you to.
Thanks very much, Nicole, and thank you, William, for holding the program for me. Like some of you here, I was meant to be in Lusaka today, and still quite shocked that I'm not there. and even trying to explain to other people why we're not there, it does feel a little ridiculous. The fact that this happened in the manner that it did on this continent with so little accountability is, I think, quite shocking. Zambia is not far from South Africa. Our economies are deeply connected, and in many ways are mutually beneficial. And so what happens in Zambia is certainly not an isolated case, and is certainly, I think, a worrying development for freedoms generally on the continent. Nicole, I am not going to speak so much about gagging orders and and kind of like the legal environment. I think that my colleagues on the panel are much better equipped to do that. But I do want to take this opportunity to actually ring the siren quite loudly for the deteriorating conditions for press freedom in Africa right now. We are facing multiple complex threats. Perhaps 20 years ago, it was more simple in that we knew it was just bad governments, bad autocrats who who had transparent modus operandi, and we knew how those campaigns worked. Now we have a multiplicity of campaigns that are very sophisticated from various different angles, all designed to thwart the ability of people to understand the world that they live in, because that's what press freedom stands for. It's not about me having a job or Gillian being able to publish a newspaper. What this stands for is the ability for people to be able to understand the world they live in and make the decisions about their world appropriately. And their ability to do that is being undermined in many, many ways. We have the old school autocrats that continue to exist and exist, unfortunately, without any accountability. But we also are seeing an emboldening, I think, of big business, of, I would say kind of like, the middle people within corrupt activity who are using things like the courts, but also increasingly violence against journalism. Women journalists, it's been well documented, we've spoken about it so frequently. Women journalists experience a disproportionate amount of online abuse, not just in South Africa, but around the world, shrinking the space for the experience of women journalists to exist ever more. So that violence continues to grow. We also then have the weaponization of big technology like generative AI, and the extent to which generative AI is used to sow disinformation and misinformation campaigns. This is not about the technology, it is about the extent to which the ability of people to know their world is being undermined through these technologies. That is the problem. And then we have journalism on its last legs in many, many places. I think I saw a report yesterday that it said something like in 180 countries, 150 newsrooms in 150 of those countries said that it was impossible actually to make ends meet. So the financing model for journalism, for public interest journalism, for the ability of people to actually receive the information they need and is their human right, does not exist. And so we have this increasingly contracting space for press freedom in South Africa, in Africa, and around the world. And so, I'm sure that my colleagues will talk more about what's happening in the courts and how the legal system is being manipulated, but I think that it's appropriate that we understand that that is just one very sophisticated way in which the ability of people to know their world is being undermined.
No, thanks, Khadija. That's a good sort of framing of the kind of scenario and situation that we find ourselves in as media. I think from an organization, a publication that is on the coalface, doing the journalism, these things are not theoretical. Our journalists, our newsrooms face this on a daily basis in different kinds of ways. Litigation and slap suits are a real threat to the kind of journalism that we need. And this is because it targets accountability journalism, journalism that is investigative in nature, and is aimed at stopping those kinds of pieces of journalism. It often it targets you when you're just about to publish. So you've spent a lot of time already in the investigative process, and you're about to publish, and these court papers arrive. Often on an urgent basis. Just recently you would have seen News 24 fighting a gag order around reporting it wants to do on Ekurhuleni tender, a toilet tender. Again, tried to be argued on an urgent basis, puts pressure on the newsroom, who's already, News 24 is a massive publication, but other newsrooms don't have the resources that they can activate so quickly to respond. That case is still ongoing. For the moment, News 24 seems to have ruled in News 24's favor, but it's not over. They haven't yet published the story, and so we'll see more of that. It's not a now issue, If you look back to the Moti case, where again a secretive application was put in to stop Amabungani from covering issues related to Moti. It was only after the fact that Amabungani was able to challenge that, and another judge overrules. So these are the kinds of legal battles we're facing as journalists, as newsrooms, without the resources. Commercial pressures form another form of gagging. When you are focusing on the sustainability of your organization, the choices you make in what you cover can also be influenced. It's something that we must acknowledge. There are, be it subscribers, be it members, be it your commercial advertisers who may not agree with what you're publishing, pull their advertising, pull their membership, pull their subscriptions. That's a form of, it chills you. And as media organizers and leaders, we've got to be mindful of that and be able to stand up to it. Other kinds of approaches is targeting individuals. Jacob Zuma targeting Karen Morn, singling her out as a particular case to stop her reporting. If Karen Morn didn't have the resources of News 24 behind her, where do you think that case would have landed? If a journalist doesn't have the ability to fight it, the courts will rule in the other favor. Those are the kinds of sobering things that we have to consider. Khadija, you mentioned the physical threats. Those are real. And particularly targeting young journalists who go out and in the field, whether they are groped in the crowd, whether they are made to feel that their abilities are under question all the time. These are things that as newsroom leaders, as people in the industry, we've got to start talking about and addressing. The internet and social media, wonderful tool to be able to distribute information, but it's also nasty. The number of journalists that are targeted for what they write, that are threatened with rape, threatened with murder, simply because they're reporting the truth. And it's that truth that Khadija speaks to about giving readers and our audiences the information that they need to navigate their lives, to make informed decisions, that has been threatened. And I think there's a lot of work that we have to do. When a conference like the RightsCon is shut down, and we don't see an outcry, that's telling us a hell of a lot. You know, an outcry from civil society organizations, from media organizations, and the like. Because when we allow this kind of thing to happen without challenge, without question, we're basically the frog in the pot that's boiling. And we haven't realized that actually we're about to burn.
Thanks very much, Julie.
Thanks, Julian. There has been definitely a rise of gag orders against journalists or media houses. And from a legal perspective, we have noticed it in the sense of it's usually in the form of trying to, a prior restraint or pre-publication ban, as some of you know. And so it's usually before a journalist or a media house can publish anything, you get that urgent application, which now delays everything. And I think in the last 18 months or so, we've witnessed that rise in the form of these gag orders. And I think what's worrying is there seems to be like different ways in which these gag orders are sought. And I say this because we've seen now, besides the growing thread of gag orders, but now they're using the protection orders. So that's from the Harassment Act, where a journalist is doing his or her job to get the story, which is investigating, asking the questions, following up when necessary, and all the investigative techniques that are necessary to get the story. But the person who doesn't want the story to be published will use the protection order to try and stop the publication. And it's usually in the form of an application to the magistrate courts, essentially just saying that I'm being harassed by this journalist and seeking to interdict the journalist from continuing with the story. And I think that is worrying in the sense that the Harassment Act is there for a reason, and it's there for victims of harassment. Now, if anyone who doesn't want a publication, whatever allegations to be published, using that piece of the certain section of the law to silence journalists is problematic, because that's not what that provision was designed for. So we've witnessed a lot of that in the past 18 months or so. And what's also worrying is, besides this growing thread of protection orders, the law in prior restraint itself has been set for almost 2 decades now. It's there, and it has been said that prior restraints are only ordered in exceptional cases. Not only when you decide that I don't want this to be published, so let me go to the courts and try and get an order interdicting them. And now, what the question is, what can be done? Because we have this law in the form of case law, speaking against prior restraints, but despite it being available, we still see a growing thread of these applications. Luckily, the media has been successful in defending these applications, but it still doesn't stop the people from approaching the courts with such claims. So, in terms of what can be done, I think one way could be the courts should not be hesitant to award punitive costs. For instance, in this News 24 judgment that was delivered, I think it was yesterday, the respondents, which is News 24, they did ask for punitive costs, but they were not awarded punitive costs. And the reason why they asked for punitive costs was that the journalists, as Gillian, you mentioned, they were cited in their personal capacity. But again, because they are part of a bigger media house, they were able to fight the battle. But now, what about the journalists who are not able, who don't have that support to fight these cases? So that would be number one. And possibly the second action that might also aid in trying to limit this growing thread would be judicial training, educating the judges of what this means for the media specifically. And I say this because in one of the cases that we had, it was also an urgent application. They always brought in on an urgent basis. It was in Pietermaritzburg against a doctor, a surgeon, where, of course, the doctor brought the application against carte blanche, and we answered the papers. I think it was in a day. The timelines were very limited. We answered the papers, and I think on a Friday we were in urgent court, and one of the arguments raised by the applicant's attorneys was that they asked for a postponement, stating that they were not able to file a replying affidavit to our answering affidavit. So they asked that the matter be postponed so that they can be awarded some time to reply. That was problematic, of course, because number one, carte blanche wanted to publish the story that week, same weekend. But two, the applicant brought carte blanche to court, so they could have factored their response to our answering affidavit before even dragging carte blanche to court. But I think what was very shocking in that case specifically was the judge allowing them to file their replying affidavit. So as much as the judge didn't necessarily award them what they were looking for, which was to restrain carte blanche from publishing, but essentially that was the outcome, because carte blanche was not able to broadcast that Sunday because of the order that day. As much as it was not a permanent order, it was temporal to allow them to file a replying affidavit, but the effect is that carte blanche was restrained from publishing that weekend. But eventually, if it wasn't for the Deputy Chief Justice allocating us to another judge on a different week, where we were heard and a judgment was awarded in carte blanche's favor, I'm not sure what the outcome would have been if we were still in the same court under the same judge, because that was also one of the clear indications that probably even the court, the judiciary system itself, is not so clear in terms of prior restraints. So that was number two, I guess. It's to train the judges when it comes to this area of the law, because especially now that we see this growing thread of gag orders, and possibly the third option would be, the third way would be to have some form of rules regulating attorneys. I know there is a set of rules in the UK. I'm not sure of any other country where the attorneys essentially they need to assess themselves when taking in a new matter to see whether or not this is a slap. So from the get-go, before it gets to court, the attorneys themselves they assess the case to see whether or not it is a slap, and if it is a slap, and they take it, then they will face the punitive consequences before even the journalist has to, instruct their attorneys and take the matter to court and so forth. So those could be one of the few options to try and deter the growing thread of these gag orders, and nobody knows where it's going, but I know for sure now, as much as it's a pain to the journalist, having to fight these cases. Not only are they financially taxing, but also psychologically, because now you end up doubting yourself for each and every story that you're trying to put out there, whether or not this is going to attract any form of litigation. Yeah.
Thank you so much for those very rich presentations. Thanks very much. I am going to reserve the time left for this panel for questions from the audience. So Ezekiel, can I ask that you just take the microphone around? Do a show of hands. Anyone who wants to ask any questions of the panelists?
All right, thank you. For a moment, I thought I was being silenced. Thank you very much for that interesting panel. I just going back to your inputs, Gillian, and you were talking about the threats that journalists would face and how difficult it actually is if you're not under a particular publication and you don't have those resources. And I was just wondering. So I was wondering what. All right, sorry about that. So I was now just thinking about those journalists. What are their options when they face those threats? I understand the SLAP itself, because then there's a whole court process. But what about the individual threats to their lives? How do they often deal with that? And what more can other organizations do to ensure that there's adequate support for those individuals? My name is Uyanda Siotula from SOS Coalition.
My question is for Kuhle about the LPC and the recent development in the UK that places punitive costs on solicitors, sometimes barristers, who take SLAPs, strategic litigation against public participation. Of course, we don't have that kind of framework here, but there is a high prevalence of attorneys briefing advocates for cases with absolutely no legal merit, which is outside of the mandated practice of both advocates and attorneys. And I was wondering if you feel there's some kind of oversight on the end of the LPC, or there's some kind of mandate or room under the existing rules to discipline or at least notify attorneys that it is wrong to brief or take cases with no legal merit that seek to intimidate, not win on legal grounds. Oh, I'm Ella from CFE.
Thank you. It's more of a comment than a question. It's Piers Pigu from Intel Watch. I mean, the issues that are raised by the panel fit into a larger context in terms of shrinking civil society space, funding, and so forth. And I think sometimes people look at these cases, and we talk about an increase in cases and so forth, but they look at this also in a context of multiple violations in the country that we live in. I mean, this is a country where members of the special forces whack colonels in the Hawks, for example, and no one bats an eyelid about it. So the challenge of these individual cases, translating these stories for wider constituencies and key constituencies to try and shift the needle on these conversations, instead of, the danger is we talk in echo chambers. So I guess the question might be, and it's unfair to the panel, but what kind of strategy do we need to develop here between civil society organizations, but professional associations and so forth, to reach into other constituencies to show and to demonstrate the real dangers that are at play here? Because it doesn't look very dangerous when it's 2 or 3 cases in a, in a sea of news. People say that we're exaggerating. We're taking it out of context and so forth. So for me, it's how does this translate into the messaging, which is a huge challenge for us. Thank you.
Isang Manar here for SANEF today. If a journalist in the field is suddenly faced with a prior restraint or gagging order,
at the end, but let me turn to the panelists and ask them to respond. And should we start with you, Jenny?
Yeah, just on individuals facing these kinds of challenges. I think as an industry, we need to build solidarity networks that even where an organization is facing some kind of gag attempt, we should, as an industry, rally around. Not to put up this, defensive mode, but support each other in that. I think individuals should also lean on organizations that exist, SANEF, MOXIE, freedom of expression. If you don't have the in-house support, there is support within the industry. We just need to know where to ask. And I think it's a matter of documenting everything that is happening to you, everything that you're experiencing, so that this becomes part of a body of work. I think Pierre mentioned that we're seeing the individual cases. Something needs to be pulling them together so that we see the trend and the pattern more clearly. Because if you're just looking at it at that individual level, it's a case by case. But pull together, you see the shitstorm coming, excuse my language.
So on the question on attorneys and whether the LPC has some form of directives regulating the attorneys themselves on the SLAPS issue, currently there isn't. There isn't any set of legal rules which essentially speak on attorneys in terms of how they should deal with such cases. And that is why I had mentioned as one of the possible ways in which the SLAPS can be addressed is to introduce the rules regulating the attorneys themselves. From the moment when the case is instituted, the attorneys should assess it for possible SLAPs, and if it is a SLAP, then they shouldn't accept it, and if they do accept it, then they will face the punitive cost. And I think that will also deter applicants from instituting SLAP-related cases, and it will also help the journalist side in terms of not wasting resources on fighting SLAP-related cases. But currently there isn't any set of specific rules that regulate attorneys specifically. I only also know of the UK Professional Code of Conduct that does speak into this specific area.
Thank you, Kuchle. Khadija?
So, I want to pick up on something Yanda said, just kind of like the support available or what we are seeing for individual journalists. Gillian, of course, I'm a little rusty in that, having not been in the newsroom for a few years. But I do want to raise an alarm that it is one of the deterring factors for professionalization in the sector. We're seeing more and more journalists, young journalists, leave the sector very early on. And it really is because it does feel really intimidating. It feels much bigger than you, right? Whether it's going to a protest and being groped, which is actually a frequent occurrence, or or being threatened online, or indeed then doing this great work, finding out about, doing all of your work ethically, producing a piece of work, and then at the last minute, being in court and then not having the resources to actually fight that. It is soul crushing, to be honest. And I think that this is why we have to indeed broaden our, the limits of our solidarity. This is not a journalist's problem. It is not a lawyer's problem. It is a social problem. And I think that we have to be able to speak beyond our little clubs and be able to find the language that demonstrates why this is a social problem, a public problem. The fact that one journalist's ability to tell the story actually has an implication on whether our economy grows at the end of the day, because there's direct correlations between how well press freedom scores do and how well economies do. It is in our public interest to ensure that we have a thriving media environment. And we need to find the language and the people who are able to communicate that. Because I think that for us to be able to say, we're in trouble, wringing our hands, we're not getting far. I think that we've been talking about SLAPS for the last 10 years now. It's only getting worse, with no accountability. And it's not seen really as a public problem. It's seen as very much a media problem, when actually the media exists only at the behest of the public. And so we need to get better, I think, in making those connections and being able to tell these stories that reach into the homes of normal South Africans just trying to fill their petrol tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks
Khadija.
So reminding myself.
Just to say, so I said I would come back to the pointed question. Some of you will know this, some of you may not know. There is an organization, it's a collaborative undertaking called the Free Expression Legal Network. It consists of many members of organizations represented here. At the present time, the Campaign for Free Expression is convening it, but it also brings together attorneys with specialist media law excellence. So we have the great privilege of having Weber Wenzel and legal practitioners like Kuhle Mavuso participating in that. We've also got counsel with specialist media law expertise. And the idea is to, where we can, assist journalists, media practitioners who are unable to afford the costs of legal representation when they're facing these types of gagging orders, threats. That's particularly true, obviously, and Khadija spoke about sort of the cratering economic system underlining journalism and the particular vulnerability of freelance practitioners. So the idea is that this network should be approached, and where we can, we will look to assist those who cannot afford the costs involved. Finally, just to say in respect of Piers' comment, I think that that's absolutely right. I mean, again, listening to all the presentations, I mean, I thought Khadija speaking about how we conceptualize media freedom, and it's essentially about the public's right to know and to understand. And that so many forces at the moment are coalescing around making sure that the public can't understand what is happening, right? And creating kind of these specific conflicts and polarizations so that we disable the type of understanding and deliberation that we need in an increasingly complicated world. I also think for all the kind of gobsmacking awfulness of Zambia's cancellation of RightsCon, it is a really important reminder of the type of context that we're working in. We know that the United States, and the big tech platforms are going to take apart any attempt at regulation of digital platforms. But it's a stark reminder that there are other big powers. The fact that China will hold hostage the entire sub-Saharan African continent's ability to engage in these debates for the purposes of pursuing their own sort of geopolitical vendettas is a stark reminder of the terms by which we look to engage. And so I think we need to remember that. And as Gillian was saying, it's an outrage that there isn't more of an outrage about this cancellation. But we need to think about how we do this smartly and well, sort of join the dots, as you say. But thank you so much to a really fabulous panel and for starting us off today. I'm now going to hand over to Tandy Smith, who will take us away for the second session, which is weaponizing the law and acting against slaps. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nicole. I'm going to ask Tina to come up and join me. We have two of our panelists joining online for the session. Can we confirm that they are online? So while we're doing that, let me introduce everyone. So for the session, we have Tina Power, a director at, which one am I introducing today? At Alt Advisory, thank you. And then online, we are going to be joined by Elizabeth Onyango, who is the head of the Africa Hub for the Thomson Reuters Foundation, as well as Maristella Simeu, who is the Africa Senior Legal Advocacy Officer for the International Press Institute, the IPI. Do we have both online? I think we do. Fantastic. Thank you very much. This session is really going to be focused on looking at some of the legal threats that are undermining media freedom, but looking specifically at case studies between what we're seeing in South Africa, but also what we are seeing in Kenya. So we're going to look a little bit more broadly at a sort of a more regional perspective. We are also going to be hearing about the weaponizing the law, threats to media freedom in Kenya, and then it's a report that from the Thomson Reuters Foundation. So the first one on Kenya, and also looking at the upcoming report on South Africa. And so it's really going to be a deep dive in some of the more legal areas around this. We're also going to be bringing up after our panelists have spoken, we're going to be just having a quick look at a website, a tool that is available to the public that gives you insight and information about what to do if you are facing a slap suit, and information around that. So that is slapback.org.za. So we'll have a look at that. But without taking any further time, I'm looking at you because you're the only panelist in here. We will first be hearing from Elizabeth. There we go, Elizabeth. Fantastic to see you. I know I'm looking at the screen, but I think the camera's on my back now. But fantastic to have you join us online. Thank you so much for making the time. Is the room audio audible to you? Can you see and hear us? Okay, this is what I was tasting. We are just busy sorting out audio from our side to hear you. I don't think so. Elizabeth is supposed to be talking now. She's It's not on mute. Can we check? There we go. There we go. We've got you. All right, fantastic. Great. I think over to you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll carry on. History. Continue the important work of informing the public, holding power to account, which is essential for societies to be able to function freely and fairly. And one of the gravest and growing threats to media freedom we have observed through our work is the weaponization of the law. And by that, we mean the deliberate use or misuse of legal provisions and processes to intimidate, silence, or economically weaken media actors. You can go to the next slide, please. So in 2023, we published a report providing global insights on legal attacks on journalists. At the time, it was the first of its kind that actually provided a cohesive overview of some of the prevalent global trends in legal threats against journalism. And nearly half of the respondents surveyed across 106 countries reported that they or their media organization were facing legal threats, and really revealing the sheer scale of the be similar, within countries, country-specific studies. And so we embarked on a series, starting with Kenya, which was published in February, and then South Africa, which will be published the following month, and Tina will provide some insights. And so, we've talked about this already from the first panel, but you really, why does it matter and now? And then also why Kenya? So, for us, the global trend is clear. Legal threats are increasingly the tools that are used to silence, intimidate, and financially and back to the latest World Press Freedom Index. Of the 5 indicators that they use to assess press freedom, they flag that the legal indicator has seen the sharpest decline. And this decline is attributed to the rise in slaps that are used against journalists. And we looked at Kenya for various reasons, and probably similar to some of the reasons we looked at South Africa. Some of them, it's strategically positioned, often perceived to be representative of democratic progress within Africa, strong constitutional protections, a vibrant media and civil society. But yet, research reveals deteriorating space for media freedom and the persistent use and abuse of the law to stifle press freedom and control the flow of information. So we thought by looking at how weaponization of the law is unfolding around. Again, unfortunately, these are experiences that are familiar and challenges that are not unique to Kenya. When we have presented the report at forums, continental forums, the patterns resonate. And so understanding how these threats manifest may allow us to better anticipate and respond, and especially in that spirit of much needed solidarity and closer networks towards finding solutions. And then, of course, we have our 2027 elections on the horizon, and the stakes could not be higher. The ability of the press to report freely, safely, and independently is under unprecedented pressure. In addition to that, these elections follow some recent, in Kenya, pivotal politically charged events. We had the anti-finance law protests, Gen Z protests in 2024 and 2025, and those were charged, and we saw a lot of some of these issues come up. And importantly, also, we had the preceding polls in the East African region. As we know, there's now this authoritarian playbook that is being referenced quite a bit, not to mention, the rise in transnational repression as well. So that's really, sets the scene for that. And maybe you can go to the next two slides, please. Oh, sorry, the one before. Sorry, that's me. I was looking at the, yes, perfect. Thank you. So our report was informed by a voluntary survey of 100 responses, focus group discussions, and a panel of Kenya media experts. And these are just some of the findings that we recorded. 42% of respondents surveyed have say they have faced legal threats in response to their work, litigation, arrest, platform shutdowns. 65% of respondents highlighted legal protection as their top support need, which just reflects, again, part of how we ended the last panel, just the growing intensity of these attacks and the need for coordinated action. 24% of survey participants identified abuse of court processes as one of the biggest threats to journalism in Kenya, and over half expressed a lack of confidence in the legal system ability to protect journalists covering sensitive topics. Next slide, please. So maybe, hold on, I don't have control of it here, sorry. Okay, yes, so this, sorry, just you can go back. This is just quotations from some of our interviewees talking about threats they face, and one talking about the hefty fines. It's not unfamiliar, and just the difficulty they face as media, and then also as creators. Next slide, please. So that findings identified 6 critical legal threats, and today I'm just going to go through. I'm going to really focus on one, the abuse of court processes for the purpose of this panel, but just mention the others. So we had also disabling and regressive legislation. And for Kenya, especially what came out was the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, which I think also resonates quite a lot regionally, and also the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Also, we found a weak implementation of existing media laws And in this case, especially, we had examples of just frustrations and challenges and issues with access to information, access to information. And also, we have a whistleblowing protection. We have a bill that has been in the passing for a very, very long time and keeps being stalled. And all these affect just the ability to be able to openly and freely share information. Technology facilitated harms, not only risk to the integrity of information and credibility of experiencing it in 2025. The impunity and safety of journalists, we've talked about that. Just the impunity and failure to protect or condone attacks against journalism, just leave them facing persistent risks and no legal protections or action taken against perpetrators. Sustainability of the media industry. Again, you know, the law has just not kept pace with the economic and financial pressures facing the media sector, whether it's against the financial tactics that have been used in a retaliatory fashion to punish media houses. You know, for example, the withdrawing of advertising has been used quite a lot here. Then also the rapid rise of AI has introduced more commercial challenges, whether it's unfair competition, IP concerns, and the law is not keeping up at the pace it should be. So altogether, all these six specific areas that we found, but you know, all together they really weaken and undermine the long-term sustainability of the media sector, and in many ways they're also interrelated, and you'll see as I'm talking about some of the cases that we have. Next slide, please. So we've got three types of three key abuses that emerged in this study. One, slap suits. Of course, these are, you know, we've talked about them, and really all slap suits, prior restraints, gag orders, and then also punitive defamation claims. We've got criminal proceedings there too, and that's largely related to the fact that some of the, you know, as much as defamation is no longer criminalized in Kenya, it still appears in certain aspects of the penal code, and therefore can be used. And then, though there's been some progress, the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act also had some criminalizing sections, which I'll talk about, though there's some positive development there. So I'm going to talk about one example, starting with the slap suits. In terms of sharing some case studies, is our largest telecom company, Safaricom. It's a case about them and a journalist. So an investigative journalist had requested information from Safaricom under the Rights to Access, the Right to Access Information Act, the Right to Access Information, sorry. And he sought details about court orders that were received by Safaricom from the police between June and October 2024. And this is important because this was the period around where our anti-finance bill, Gen Z protests were taking place, and there were abductions, enforced disappearances, arrests, and extrajudicial killings. And the speculation and the accusation, I suppose, was that Safaricom was colluding with the police to aid them in tracking a number of individuals that they were pursuing. So this journalist, Robert Q, wrote to Safaricom asking about the court orders and whether individuals' personal data and communication records and data privacy measures were in place when they were sharing this information. How did they share this information? So he asked a series of questions about it just to establish what happened. And Safaricom initially ignored this request. And the journalists then went to the Commission on Administrative Justice, who regulate and enforce Access to Information Act. And they issued an order for compliance. No, in fact, they first invited the telecom company to come and sit down, I suppose, to come and engage with them and also respond to the journalists' requests. And Safaricom ignored this, and therefore the Commission on Administrative Justice issued an order and saying that they were in breach of the act, and issued an order for compliance. So what the telecom company did next was to rush to the High Court to appeal this order, and they took the individual journalist to court under very spurious claims. And this is in court, and the fear was that it's really intimidation tactic designed to frustrate and silence a journalist. And it had also transpired that a while before that, they'd also threatened legally one of our large print newspapers for publishing a similar story. Not only did they threaten the newspaper, but the journalists and the civil society organizations that had come together to put together this information, and then took them before the Media Council of Kenya. So, as you know, the goal is not really to win, but to burden, deter, and silence. And it speaks to, this particular case speaks not only to, abuse of court processes, but also to technology facilitated harm, right, in terms of surveillance, and then use of data and privacy. And also, one of the things the telecom company did was to withdraw the advertising from this print media. So threaten them with legal action, and then withdraw advertising at a time when things are really difficult. And that, also speaks to one of the threats about sustainability, and just the law not being able to protect that. And then, just the weak implementation of media laws. Okay, I'll try and go a bit faster. So prior restraint. So here we have a case of a teacher who obtained an injunction blocking African Uncensored media outlet from publishing an investigation that looked into sexual misconduct at a very reputable school. And the court eventually ruled in the outlet's favor, which is positive. And you see the courts also beginning to find that public interest and child safety outweigh reputational harm, and that suppressing the story risks silencing victims and endangering children. So that ended up, they had to wait 2 months before the order, before they could actually publish, but they got to publish it. We know the journalist who actually wrote the story, and told us that they'd used actually a pre-publication guide that we produced, to really make sure we have a checklist, just to make sure that the story was tight. And that is also what helped them in the case and was cited, just because they had strong evidence and testimony to back up the story. On criminal proceedings, this is a blogger who was arrested and also under dubious circumstances after a senior police official filed a criminal defamation complaint over posts alleging corruption. So this policeman had an investigation on corruption, but they did arrest the blogger who died in custody. So these officers have since been charged, but really it's just being able to arrest over false accusation has been one of the challenges we have faced. Since then, in March this year, the cybercrime law at the Court of Appeal, they repealed Section 22 and 23 of that law, which criminalized false accusation or fake news, as we call it. So there is improvement there. We still have issues related to cyber harassment, which really, is still overly broad and overreaching. But that is also positive in terms of the court beginning to see that some of this legislation, when drafted in such wide and broad terms, can actually end up doing a lot of harm. Okay. So I'll just talk about some of the positive developments, which some of the courts have been sort of providing some measures of relief. What I didn't talk about when it came to defamation also, when you talk civil defamation, the claims are hefty, they're high, they're very punitive, and we've got examples in the report about some of them, especially awarded to people of interest and importance, etc. But in relation to slaps, prior restraints and defamation lawsuits, there is establishing jurisprudence that requires parties to bear their own costs. Once it's established that a case concerns is a matter of public interest. So there's a slow, sort of growing movement there. And also they have demonstrated that they would lift orders that seek to stop the publication of public interest stories. And we have a few cases that have done so, including one against the telecom company as well, against a lawyer. I think in terms of recommendations, I go with we talked about in the first panel, training for judges and magistrates is essential to recognize these suits and also support, with media actors through peer learning on litigation surgeries to deter slaps. Also in terms of taking some collaborative approaches, including what you're going to hear from on this panel as well at the regional level. I think that's important. And for defamation, really ensuring to remove criminal defamation and insult offenses from the law, and guidelines to prevent these excessive civil damages that are really hurtful to the profession. And then creating a legal aid to support journalists challenge punitive defamation awards. For criminal defamations, hold law enforcement officers accountable through disciplinary, civil, or criminal action where they misuse some of these laws that are broad to arrest, intimidate journalists. I think that would go some ways to rectifying the situation, and just reforming prosecutorial policy to reduce frivolous or meritless prosecutions. Thank you.
You too.
This one's working.
Should I stand over there? Oh, now it's working. Now it's working. All right. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. We are incredibly, I think, difficult insights into what we are seeing in the Kenyan landscape. I'm not going to take much more time, Tina. I think let's go straight into what we are seeing in South Africa.
Thank you, Thandi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tina Power. I'm going to be relatively brief so that we've got some space for questions. I'm going to follow a substantially similar pattern to what you just saw with Elizabeth. You may have figured out that we work together and that we've prepared similar presentations. And you'll also see that there's some really interesting overlaps between South Africa and Kenya. And then we're going to move on to some regional discussions as well to tie this all together. An additional caveat is that a lot of what was said in the first panel is covered in the report. And that's good because it means that we're aligning on what the risks are. And then I'm going to tie together some of the recommendations that we've started touching on already. So, in short, we found there are 4 prevailing threats, but then with in those threats to the media sector in South Africa, there are 14. That's a bit much for today, so I'm just going to focus on the first 3, prior restraints, slaps, and protection orders, which we've already started speaking about quite a bit. Similarly to Kenya, we found that there were some shifts in the stats. 50% of the people that we surveyed have said that they are facing legal threats in response to their work. And I think if there was more time and we interviewed more people, that number may be higher. And by virtue of the first panel, we can already see that that is a significant issue. We've noted that there were at least 10 reported cases of prior restraint last year. We've also seen that increasingly people are requiring legal support in what they are facing on a daily basis, and increasingly participants are seeing that court processes are being abused in order to silence and stop them. So in terms of some case studies, the first one is one we haven't spoken about today, so I'll spend a little bit of time on this. This happened late last year. It was South Africa's first super injunction. And this is a problem for several reasons. So ultimately, a high court dismissed an urgent interdict. That's the right outcome. But what is of concern is what happened before the interdict was granted. Here, Open Secrets, a non-profit organization, was publishing an investigative report on the armored company called Integrated Convoy Protection, ICP. And ICP sought to restrain them, to get the court to agree that the investigative report should not be published. What the acting judge went on to do was to grant then bound by very strict confidentiality regimes as well, simply in order to participate as friends of the court. Why that was a problem should hopefully be clear to all those in the room, but it is concerning because this marks the first time South Africa has seen a super injunction. Thankfully, it was overturned, but it does mean that our courts are capable of making orders like this, and that is something we need to be very, very aware of. The second is the Morn case, and we've touched on this already, so I won't go into it. Save to say that, again, powerful actors who are trying to get journalists to not say things that they don't like are being targeted through an array of prosecutions. The first one was an interdict. This was a private prosecution. And the last example that we've also touched on is the abuse of protection orders. And here I've highlighted the example of journalist Tomo Nkadima, who was arrested for allegedly breaching a protection order. It was found that there was no such thing. And ultimately, it ended up okay, but the damage was already done. A journalist was arrested. Powerful people, again, are threatening to use protection orders in order to silence people. And as was spoken about earlier, protection orders are really important. They protect people. They serve an invaluable role in our society. And if they are being misused to silence, we need to stamp that out incredibly quickly as well. These are just 3 examples of abuse of court processes, and there are many more. The lawyers in the room, who there are quite a few of thankfully today, know of the trials and tribulations that it takes to manage these cases. We've spoken about the cost of litigation, the time, the stress involved. Being an individual litigant against powerful actors like the Morty Group is incredibly scary as well. So the mental toll and the psychosocial toll that this takes as well, in addition to the legal toll, is really, really worrying. So while South Africa, by and large, has a stable and functional democracy, and while, by and large, our judiciary is holding, if we are going to leave these threats unchallenged or unaddressed, we are on a very slippery slope. And that's why it's important to have convenings like this and to respond to the deeply regrettable events of the last few days in the context of Zambia. But we, in South Africa in particular, need to start acting, and acting quite quickly. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes on how we can do that. Fortunately, there are a lot of really quick wins right now. Some of them, setting up new laws, we know that takes time. But there are some things that we can do today to make the system better and to safeguard our courts and safeguard our media ecosystem more broadly. So the first relates to institutional and judicial reform. And some of these have been touched on by earlier speakers. like there's very sound reason to do so. We've also proposed in the TRF report to encourage the judge president to issue practice directives. For lawyers in the room, I know we don't always love the practice directives, but what practice directives are for the non-lawyers in the room are the ways in which lawyers must conduct themselves. So again, it's similar to the case online and court online management system to say when these issues happen, this is how you need to react. So it just gives us a quicker route. Instead of having to panic for the first 24 hours when an urgent interdict is launched, we have a system where it's before a judge quicker and the systems are in place so that everyone is heard and it is managed more appropriately. On the legislative reform perspective, there are three approaches that need to be considered. One is the introduction of an anti-SLAPP law, which I know many people in this room have been working on, and we'll be touching on the model law shortly. The second, and maybe a quicker approach while we are embarking on a law reform process, is to approach the rules board. In South Africa, the rules board governs the legal profession and how we conduct ourselves and the rules we are bound by. And again here, similar to sort of linking all of these situations together, we can amend the rules to say if there is a SLAPP suit, if there is a prior restraint, if there is a super injunction, this is how you deal with it, and these are the rules, and it immediately gets flagged. The question of costs comes into play, and before we even go to hearing, we determine whether or not this case in and of itself is a problem that we need to address. Then we've also proposed reviewing the Protection from Harassment Act, not to change it because it is bad, but to assess it and confirm whether or not the loopholes that may be created by people misusing it to silence journalists can be properly dealt with, and if an amendment is necessary, to then lobby Parliament to do so. In terms of the media industry, these are all relatively self-explanatory. Policies on legal defense for journalists. This seems to be a hot topic for today, how media is handling it themselves. Continuing to tell the story. And here, I'm not a journalist. I don't know how difficult it must be to be faced with significant court processes that are scary and really, really real. But what other journalists can then do is tell the story. So when one journalist is interdicted and one journalist is facing something horrific, other journalists can rally around and be allies in this context, because we need to know that this is happening. If journalists are silenced and then they then self-silence, we will never know. So other journalists need to step up and continue to tell the story. And then we need to work with bodies like the Press Council to make sure that the correct stories are being told if anything is going wrong, or if there are roles that regulatory bodies can play to safeguard and support our journalists more. And then lastly, as always, civil society has a role to play. Many of the civil society organizations in this room have been part and parcel of the cases that we've spoken about and the ones that are still ongoing. And so pursuing strategic and test case litigation, setting good precedent, making sure that our judges are eventually making the right call is really important. Advocacy is equally important. I see no reason why colleagues in the room should not, later today or first thing tomorrow, approach the rules board and just get it done. There's nothing holding you back. I appreciate that. May require lawyers, and lawyers sometimes take time, but issuing the instruction can happen quite quickly. The next is Slapback, and this is a website that was created by Moxie, and it's a fantastic website. It does need a little bit of an update given the last 2 slap cases that were handed down since the website was launched, but it's a really useful mapping, and shout out to Penyo Sakati who created the website. You can raise your hand so everyone can see. There we go, Penyo Sakati. It provides guidance on what the present cases are in South Africa that have dealt with slap litigation, and it helps you navigate whether or not you've been slapped, which is quite helpful, because it can be that you've just been served with normal court proceedings that because you've done something wrong, or it helps you navigate, is this actually really excessive? Is this an abusive process? What do I do if this happens? So it's meant to be a very practical, easy to use tool for people to navigate if they have been harmed. And then the Freedom of Expression Legal Network, which has already been very eloquently addressed by Nicole, is 100% on the agenda, and civil society could continue to work with that. So pretty much, as always, we all need to pull up our socks. We all need to work together. There is not one silver bullet that is going to stop the weaponization of our courts and the abusive process, but there's a lot we can do to further protect our judiciary and to protect our journalists. And we just pretty much need to get going. It's that simple. It's a little bit more complicated, but it is quite simple. And with that said, I hand back to Tandy, and I hope that was quick enough.
There, this one is working now. All right, thank you very much, Tina, for getting through that as swiftly as you did as well. I know that we are running out of time. Mary Stella, are you online? Okay, great.
Yes, I am.
Oh, fantastic. Lovely to hear your voice. Can we get her video on as we wait to bring up? I'm very sorry to have to do this to you, but unfortunately, as the last panelist, I'm going to ask you to try be as quick as possible, just so that we can have a few minutes to take one or two questions as well. But Mary Stella, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Thandi. I will do my best. Hello to everyone. My name is Mary Stella Simiu. I work with the International Press Institute as the Africa Senior Legal Advocacy Officer. And I will quickly take us through the African Commission draft resolution on countering slaps in Africa and the development of an anti-slaps law. I think this is a perfect segue from the in-person panel as well as this panel, because then I don't have to belabor the why. Because from their presentation, you can see why this resolution is important. What is the rationale behind such a resolution? If you look at the context, if you look at the legislative vacuum that we have discussed, there is a need for greater guidance from the regional space with regards to how we can counter slaps at the national level as well as at the regional level. And when we were actually doing the background research for this particular resolution, we did not find any other framework at the African level that actually expressly mentions slaps. This lexicon, this concept of slaps is not really integrated into the lexicon of in our human rights bodies, and that becomes a problem. And looking at case law, both at the regional level and at the national level, we see that it's underdeveloped or completely entirely absent. And so that goes to the why this resolution is important. But just to give a quick overview of this resolution, and I'm sure there are organizations and individuals in the room and on the call who have already had a look at this resolution and given their input, and many thanks for that. But with the overview, we are able to capture this background that has already been discussed in this event today. This background is captured to actually show us and rationalize why we need this resolution. It builds upon the relevant foundational frameworks, be it on freedom of expression, access to information, the protection of human rights defenders, the obligations of various stakeholders, including businesses. Some of the frameworks that already exist are captured in the resolution. We do include an acknowledgement and also a recognition of comparative regional developments that we can draw inspiration and lessons from, in this case, the European Union Directive. And we proceed to give a layered multi-stakeholder solutions. The resolution proceeds to give these layered multi-stakeholder solutions as to how to address this issue of slaps from the regional level. And this includes legislative solutions, judicial measures, as well as administrative measures. I just wanted to put forward the definition of slaps that is included in this resolution, being meritless litigation. It could be civil, criminal, or administrative, instituted by powerful individuals or entities to obstruct public participation, silence critics and watchdogs, impede investigative reporting, and evade accountability in matters of public interest through long, arduous, and costly litigation, typifying a gross abuse of the judicial or administrative processes. I'm hoping as people actually look at the resolution and give back their feedback, you will look at this definition and see whether it really captures the incidence of slaps and is able to at least be a starting point for whatever measures will be taken up with regards to slaps in terms of the recommendations that we have put forward. Moving on to the call to action, the recommendations, which is the gist of this resolution. The first part goes to states, and I'm happy to say that the recommendations that are in the resolution greatly align with the recommendations that have been proffered by the panelists, as well as the two reports that we have discussed in this session. So one, just calling to states to comply with their obligations under regional and international law with regards to the respect, protection, and fulfillment of the relevant rights. Two, looking at issues of legal reform, the need to repeal criminal laws on defamation, sedition, false news, and insults, and making reference to the 2019 Declaration on Principles of Freedom of Expression and Access to Information, and particularly Principle 22. Another recommendation goes towards strengthening judicial independence, the need to entrench robust guarantees for access to justice, the right to fair trial, protection against undue influence of judicial actors by powerful political and corporate elites. This has also been mentioned. Also calling on independent investigations, especially with regards to any misuse of court processes, independent investigations with regards to SLAPs, especially when they are targeted at public watchdogs. So our journalists, human rights defenders, community activists, whistleblowers, opposition figures, lawyers, and the list goes on, and make sure that the perpetrators are held to account. Still on states, the resolution calls on developing and strengthening and enforcing ethical standards. Here we are looking at our legal practitioners, and Tina has mentioned this, looking to ensure that the ethical standards are stronger and enforced. And this is just really emphasizing the fidelity to the law above all else. The next recommendation touches on promoting access to legal assistance and legal aid, because we know this becomes quite a challenge to victims of SLAPs, and ensuring that this is guided by our existing frameworks, in particular the principles and guidelines on the right to a fair trial and legal assistance in Africa. We also have in the resolution recommendations to other stakeholders, and in particular we want to build upon this resolution. It's not just an end, but to ensure that we are actually strengthening these frameworks and providing greater guidance, especially at the national level, on how states need to address SLAPs and what measures they need to undertake. And one thing we put forward here, and I'm really looking forward to also input on this, is a direction to the African Commission Special Rapporteur on Free Expression and Access to Information to develop an anti-SLAP model law following a broad consultation process. It will be great to hear back from you whether the model law is actually the way to go, or another mechanism, or we need to think about another framework, be it guidelines, be it a declaration. So that would be great to hear in terms of feedback. Still on other stakeholders, in this particular process, we are urging states, civil society, and other stakeholders to provide their full cooperation and support the Special Rapporteur in this consultation and drafting process. In the resolution, there's also a request to the Special Rapporteur to ensure that they do provide a progress report within 1 year on the drafting of this particular model law. We also encourage the Special Rapporteur, when this model law is ready, to widely disseminate it and provide any technical assistance and capacity building to states with regards to adopting and implementing any national anti-SLAP laws. And finally, the recommendation goes to national judicial training councils. This also aligns with the recommendations in the report to just ensure there's continuous training of judicial officers on how to identify and adjudicate SLAPs fairly. And so as I conclude, what are the next steps? As I indicated, this first draft already went through an initial first round of consultation, and now we are opening it up to a second consultation round for the rest of the month of May. I have included a link there, but in the next slide you will see a QR code that you can scan that will take you directly to the document with the full resolution, as well as some survey questions just to guide us into how we can actually strengthen this resolution. And after this second round of consultation, we are going to forward this draft to the Special Rapporteur. And just to say that now, based on what the Special Rapporteur actually finally decides, the draft might change. the office might have, the mandate might have other recommendations or change some of the recommendations we have put forward there. So that is something that we might have to anticipate as a next step. But either way, we are going to forward this draft to the special rapporteur after the consultation process and hope that, I know the current session is under, the private session is underway, the public session is upcoming. It's likely, we are hoping that it will be presented, let's say in the next session, but we still don't know when this is actually going to be presented before the African Commission. But that is it from our side. That is the resolution. This is the QR code you have on your screen that will take you to the resolution. Please provide your feedback in this month of May. I will be sending reminders to participants to actually give back their feedback so that we ensure at least we have a foundational document that can help build and strengthen frameworks on SLAPs in the African continent and have that ripple effect to our national frameworks. Thank you very much.
Right, round of applause. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mary Stella. And I think if people didn't get that QR code or the link, I'm sure that we can share it as well with anyone who wants to contribute to that. So thank you very much to the speakers, the insightful presentations, and I think just in the interest of time, we do want to allow for just one or two questions. So if you have a burning question to either of the panelists or just a comment, we'll take those now. No questions. It's like I was waiting for your hand. Noor, if you could just put up the Slapback site so people can have just a quick view of what that looks like. There we go. Oh, thank you. Are you that microphone? Oh, perfect. Okay, we'll take those two questions.
So this is not actually a question, but I think on the SLAPs, we want to acknowledge the collaboration of many organizations, thanks to IPI Africa, who took the lead on drafting it, but we also had inputs from Campaign for Free Expression, Center for Information Integrity in Africa, Thomson Reuters Foundation, and many experts from around the continent who's been working on it. And we would like to encourage more people to get involved and give us your comments. What's great about the African policy-making process is that this effort so far has been entirely civil society driven. And then it goes to the special rapporteur, who then tries to make sure that the resolution is done in a way that would carry the support of the members of the African Commission on Human People's Rights. If it was being done the other way around, I don't think we would have had the progressive resolutions on digital rights, for instance, the African Declaration on Freedom of Expression, Access to Information, a whole host of other African instruments. So let's use the opportunity to make our voices heard.
Thank you very much. It's like a round of applause. All right, thank you. There was another question, comment. Can we let's get the. All right, great, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry to ask another question or make another comment, but it kind of relates to the strategic consideration that was just mentioned about the way this has developed on SLAP, and it's something that Tina said about in her quadrant of 4 areas, the legislative reform. And this raises a question which I think that in the South African context is often critical, but often avoided by civil society actors who think that they can charge away on the moral righteousness of what they're doing. And that's to build political champions for these issues and to invest in that. And there's a lot of opportunity to do that. And I'm not sure that we see much of that. We see the failure of that in a number of areas. So for me, that'd be interesting to hear your comment on that, Tina. Thanks.
All right. Tina, do you want to go ahead and respond? And then we will wrap up this session.
100% agree. We do need to identify key champions and allies who can actually take this forward. I think the difficulty that we've had, particularly with the Department of Digital Communications and whichever changing name that they're on now, and William may correct me if I'm wrong, but the turnover of ministers, which has then led to the turnover of DGs, which has then just made it very difficult to have champions to continue with this. One of our last meetings with them indicated that on this whole white paper process, as we all know, there's been many iterations of this, and each time there's a new administration or a change of ministers, the whole process gets wiped away. So I do think civil society is trying, but there are some practical challenges as well. So when we get good people, we must invest immediately and start lobbying and working with them, and not always be on the moral high ground. I agree with that point entirely. Practically, we have had some challenges, but it does not mean it's insurmountable at all.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you to our speakers, Elizabeth, Tina, Mary Stella. Thank you for your expertise and your insights into those issues. We appreciate you making the time on such short notice as well. Thank you. All right, Nicole, am I handing back over to you for the quick fire section?
Yes. So our second to last session is quickfire voices on media freedom. But before while we do that, and this is supposed to be a very energetic, lively session, we're going to ask a number of people to come up, grab the mic, give a perspective for around 3 minutes, and then move on. But while they're doing that, please go and help yourself to refreshments over there. Pick yourselves up, get some energy, and you know, this is a performative session in a way, and celebrating media freedom. And I think I'm going to start with William for your first few minutes. Oh no, it's not. Sorry, I'm
George is going to be the timekeeper. Do you want to just introduce yourself, George?
Okay. I'm the ruthless George.
No, you've got to speak because they keep it online.
Okay, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is George. I'll be your timekeeper for today. For those speaking, there's 2 signals that I will give. You only have 4 minutes and 30 seconds. At 4 minutes, I'll blow the whistle once to indicate that your time is almost up. And then when your time is up, I'll blow the whistle like a referee when the match ends. So 3 times, so you know that your time is completely up. Yeah, so please adhere to those rules.
Okay, can my time start now? Okay, I'm starting so that I get a few extra seconds. So the perspective I wanted to bring to this was to imagine if we'd all gone along with the censorship that had been carried out so ruthlessly last week. So instead, I've brought a prepared statement from the Department of Public Clarity. You can imagine this is where we would be. The subject is the National Information Harmony Day, which is formerly known as World Press Freedom Day. Good afternoon, citizens of Unified Territories. Today we celebrate May the 3rd. Under the previous chaotic administration of the old world, this day was known as the World Press Freedom Day, a relic of a time when discordant voices were allowed to threaten the stability of our markets and the sanctity of our leadership. Following the decisive restoration of 2024 and the subsequent global alignment between our Supreme Executive and his counterparts in the East and South, we have evolved. Today, we do not celebrate freedom to lie, dissent, or undermine the national character. Instead, today we celebrate Information Harmony Day. Applause. I mean, if you don't applaud, there are people behind your heavies who will beat you ruthlessly. Accordingly, we would welcome and that is to say, if you don't welcome, your family will lose their jobs and you might be tortured, i.e. you probably almost certainly will be tortured. For your pleasure here today are our mandatory narratives that you need to adhere to. Firstly, the end of friction. We celebrate the final silence of special interest journalists by removing their divisive rhetoric of nonsense ideas of gender equality and minority protections. We have cleared the airwaves for the only voice that matters, the voice of authority. Second narrative is patriarchal stability. Today we honor the return to traditional strength and values. Misogyny is a word from the past. Today we know it instead as the natural order. Media that promotes rights over duty have been sent for realignment therapy. Our third narrative, the alliance of giants. We take a moment to applaud our great leaders of the G4. Screw those G20 bastards anyway. They have proven that press freedom is simply the freedom of the leader to be heard without the static and noise of the weak. A pre-approved quote you may all use today is, "Truth is not what is discovered, truth is what is commanded. To question is to disrupt, and to disrupt is to betray." Remember that, no betrayal here. Accordingly, we have hereby authorized the following three commemorative activities. First is the digital purge. Use your state/Palantir surveilled device to report any archival links or ghost blogs that still mention ideas of civil liberties or independent monitoring. We are watching, obviously, but we need you to watch too. Second is Appreciation Hour. From 6 p.m. this evening, all screens will broadcast our Supreme Executive's 4-hour speech on the weakness of autonomy. Attendance will be tracked via retinal scan. Thirdly, for a little bit of fun, who likes a warm fire on such a cold day, we're having the Windhoek Pyre. In a symbolic gesture, outdated textbooks, things like the Windhoek Declaration and Investigative Journalism Awards, we're going to throw them all together on a symbolic fire and set it all alight and burn things to symbolize our return to the natural order. Our closing statement: remember, citizens, you are free from the burden of choice. You are free from the exhaustion of doubt. Under the watchful eye of our great protector, the press is finally free to fulfill its main purpose, the glorification of state. Stay aligned, stay silent, stay grateful.
Very good, with 10 seconds to spare. Okay, next we call a representative from Campaign for Freedom of Expression, Ezekiel Kekana.
Good afternoon. Well, I'm no longer a journalist. I spent years as a journalist, so I'm no longer a journalist, but I know the challenges that journalists are going through, and I want to talk about one Faith Zaba in Zimbabwe. For those who don't know who Faith Zaba was or is, she's a journalist who was arrested for undermining the president. And last week when I spoke to her, she spoke about the fact that she's so tired of being a journalist in Zimbabwe. And she had asked me that everywhere I go, I need to speak about the fact that we in South Africa, as we continue to enjoy media freedom, we should make noise and we should ensure that whatever that is happening in Zimbabwe, we talk about it. So I want to implore everyone today to say, while we continue to enjoy these freedoms, let us also remember our brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe. They are harassed, they are jailed, some of them are even beaten. So I think it is, the onus is on us as South Africans to ensure that we support those brothers and sisters. I thank you.
Very impressive. That's the quickest fire. My goodness. Okay, so our next speaker is from Campaign on Digital Ethics Code, Kavisha Pillay.
If I didn't know we were able to do performances. I would have prepared like an expressive dance or something like that. So I don't have any Orwellian speeches, but my position is that media freedom and tech accountability can no longer be separated, just because much of our public life is being mediated through algorithms and by tech bros who are deciding what can be seen, who has a voice, and what opinions are important. So we heard a lot about threats to media freedom, such as slaps and censorship, gagging, all of that really important. But I also think we need to consider how the power of private platforms and their role in terms of suppressing the media, either through monopoly and pulling advertising from newsrooms, but also in the same breath funding content creators. And that, content creators don't apply or abide by the same rules. Their content can be sensationalist, it can be false information, and that's often at the top of our feeds. And so now we have journalists who are competing directly with content creators and with those who don't have any code. And also the expanding information ecosystem, podcasters, influencers. We're seeing a lot of politicians now that we're going into the elections. Politicians are going to go onto the podcasters, and we know who they are, who are going to give them softball interviews. There's also lots of coordinated harassment online and narrative manipulation. So we see policemen with army gear doing media interviews. We have mega influencers propping them up, shaping a narrative, and those people, when journalists do ask questions, the same people who we are seen and who is being paraded as our heroes are saying that journalists should be thrown in jail if they're not asking the right questions. So I'm going to leave you with this, is that it's important that we resist both old forms of censorship and new forms of digital control, and a free press cannot survive in an unaccountable information ecosystem. That's my performance of dance.
With 2 minutes to spare, that's impressive as well. Next, we'll have a representative from SANEF, Itzhak Mina.
Thanks to all of those who pass your unused minutes on to me. I really appreciate it. You hear a lot about SANEF on media freedom issues, and sometimes when we have trouble in the office, I want to talk a little bit about SANEF's policy work. Policy work that's usually done in conjunction with many other organizations. The reason why I think this is quite important, even though a lot of it is being done behind the scenes, is because it is the way that we can help shape our future as media here and beyond. So we can create an environment within which it is easier to operate. So let's go through a couple of those. Some of you were involved in the M20 last year, that SANEF and MMA, by the way, so MA, no longer MMA, because MA is easier to say, right? So SANEF and MA drove that with 4 key objectives: getting information integrity on the global agenda, getting media viability as a key issue also on the agenda, and to get support from different institutions for that, driving free expression, and to acknowledge the role of journalists and the safety of journalists. So that's in a nutshell what we're trying to do with the M20. It has grown from a South African initiative to one where we now have a consortium of organizations in the US trying to make some noise alongside Donald Trump's reduced G20. And we have about 20 organizations in the UK already working on trying to get these issues on the UK's agenda for their presidency of the G20 next year. So that's one area. Another area, working with the African Commission on Human People's Rights, in particular special rapporteur, like the SLAPS issue that we discussed. One of them over years was to try and develop election guidelines, access to information, proactive disclosure, much of which has been implemented in the South African context already. Trying to get practical ways to implement the digital rights in the African Declaration on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information, participating in processes to develop all kinds of guidelines, and we work together with a number of local organizations. So MA driving one of that, SOS another one, African Alliance on Access to Data another one. Third one I want to mention is PIA reform, directly related to the declaration. Again, a collaboration with MA and more recently other organizations like CFE and Code and so on, where we're trying to get PIA reform done, making PIA fit for purpose in the digital age, acknowledging that universal access to the internet is a basic right, forcing proactive online disclosure of the kind of information that one should ask for now. So we're making progress on that. Information regulator formally started public consultations on updates to the legislation. Was that Kavisha's? Okay. Right. Work around the platforms and elections, shadow reports on election risks and mitigation. The MDPMI, the Media and Digital Platform Market Inquiry, you know some of the wins from that. Are you serious? Okay, I'll stop. I have a lot of other stuff, but I do want to say, anything you want to join us, please do so in all of this work. Shall I continue?
Thank you, Itzhak. That was brilliant. You can have a cortado at the back. Okay, our next speaker is from the Press Council, Tsile Maswanganyi. Fantastic.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I wish I could have given some of my minutes to Itzhak. You know, I'm going to be quite short and succinct. I'm from the press. Oh yeah. Yes, I'm from the Press Council. I'm responsible for communications. My task and mandate is to try and maximize the exposure of the Press Council. As you know and appreciate that most of us within the industry knows what the Press Council does, but you also agree with me that most members of the public are not aware of the duties and the mandate of the Press Council. As you know, that the organization has transformed and evolved over the past 7 decades. So pre-democracy, post-democracy, it has transformed and is still evolving. Some of the visions is to broaden the membership. You know, so far we've got over 400 members within the organization, and we also like to invite different organizations and associations from outside the industry. You know, just to give more diversity, you know, and credibility into the organization. And if you've got questions or anything, you're free to call me at any time or contact me or talk to me just after this briefing. Thank you. Oh, by the way, Itzhak sits in the council of the Press Council, so I give the minutes to you.
So with my Press Council hat on, I just want to say that Tsile here is an example of the progress with the Press Council, that we now have a full-time communications officer who will drive the digital transformation of the Press Council, digital literacy issues, and a whole range of other stuff that wasn't possible before. So I will just say that about the Press Council. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I have a challenge on the Press Council. Press Council, you know, it's old. We need to have a new name at some stage. So some of the names is, should it be the News Content Accountability Organization or something like that? So if you have ideas about new ways to refer about the accountability system for news content, let's have it.
Good one, good challenge. Awesome. Rashid first, or? Okay. All right. Online, we have Rashid Mukundu from IMS. Your time starts now.
Thank you for having me and for also organizing this event, which in itself is a form of resistance to the repression, to the silence that is being pushed by as many forces in this world. I'm picking up from what Isaac said, and to quote from the M20 declaration in 2025, which says that we face a profound global crisis in information integrity. And as Africa, we are at a crossroads and more vulnerable to information manipulation because of our lack of leverage in engaging and dealing with big tech or the global platform actors. And I want us to emphasize on the need for Africa to move from being a policy taker to a norm shaper, and to pick from the dialogues that we've been having on the continental dialogue engagements and policy dialogues that are taking place, which should inform our pushback to outperform disinformation. And to mention but a few, the Africa Commission on Human and People's Rights, Resolution 630 and 631, which are being, which were developed in 2025 and are under discussion. And also the African Union and UNESCO continental frameworks on information integrity and media and information literacy. And these do form the Africa-centered information architecture upon which we should base our actions on pushing back on disinformation. I want to quickly look at areas that we need to continue emphasizing in a coordinated manner. The need for Africa to continue maintaining a rights-based approach to tech regulation, the need for us to continue building our coalitions over siloed actions, and the need for us to continue supporting journalism as a cornerstone for information integrity. And for us, of course, to emphasize on the African context and the responses in a global framework. We are working on information integrity programming or actions from many angles, but there is need for Africa to clearly look at its contextual needs for us to continue maintaining a broad-based coalitions and coordinate our actions across many platforms at a global level. There is need for increased alignment across global principles, be it at the UN and UNESCO. There is need for increased alignment across continental policies, some of which I've already mentioned, and of course, increased alignment across practice and innovation. And we need to work around disintegration of our efforts, which weakens impact. We need to look at information integrity from an economic viability point of view, which is to emphasize on the need to work on media sustainability as a force or as a bulwark against the poisoning of the information spaces that we are seeing in the world. Let me end it here, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for organizing this. And I was hoping that we would be together in Lusaka, but that was not to be. But this in itself, to reiterate, is a form of resistance to the silence that we are being made to bear with across the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rashid. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. I don't know if... is Emmanuel online? Emmanuel? Okay. I don't think we have Emmanuel, so I'll hand over back to you.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone, for that great session. As we know from the cancellation of RightsCon, these convenings around digital rights, free expression, alignment with human rights, they're not escaping scrutiny from the big powers. And I'm sorry to say that that is true of today's proceedings as well. Fortunately, though, William, your speech was not understood as satirical. And so word has just come through that there is a bidding war for you. Trump, Xi, Putin, Mswati, Mnangagwa, they're all very keen to offer you super refugee status and the authority position of on the Federal Communications Commission and the equivalent. So, exactly, he'd be an excellent replacement for George Chiramba. But we now go to our fourth session, and this is the open letter, the draft open letter, in protest at the cancellation. And I'm going to ask Kristen Abrahams from the Campaign on Digital Ethics to come and read that out.
I'm not Kavisha. I'm just another Indian girl who works at Code. So I'm not Kavisha. That's what it says on your program. There's some QR codes all over, and I don't know if it will be screened on the screen as well. If you can just scan that, then it will take you to a link where you can access the open letter, and then either as your organization or in your individual capacity, you'll be able to sign on. So I'm just going to read it, and you can follow along with me as well. It says, we the undersigned civil society organizations from South Africa and across the African continent express our grave concern at the Zambian government's decision to cancel RightsCon 2026, scheduled to have taken place in Lusaka from 5th to 8th May, alongside the UNESCO World Press Freedom Day Global Conference 2026. Had RightsCon 2026 not been cancelled at the last minute, it would have been the first time it was held in sub-Saharan Africa, permitting the residents of this region an unprecedented opportunity to access and engage in debates about human rights and digital technologies. At a time when digital technologies are reshaping governance, public discourse, and economic life across the continent, and will likely do so far more intensely yet, the cancellation prejudices especially those in this region concerned for these issues. Those in sub-Saharan Africa are often at the sharpest end of the risks associated with digital technologies. Disinformation and coordinated influence operations, online harassment, surveillance, internet shutdowns, and the uneven power exercised by global technology companies. At the same time, digital platforms offer powerful tools for democratic participation, accountability, economic opportunity, and social mobilization. RightsCon has, over many years, provided a critical, independent space to engage these tensions, bringing together civil society, governments, researchers, and industry actors to develop responses grounded in human rights. In a statement issued on 1 May, the conveners of RightsCon, Access Now, indicated that the cancellation had come at the instigation of the People's Republic of China, objecting to the participation of Taiwanese delegates. Access Now explained that they were presented with an impossible choice by Zambia. In order for the event to proceed, they would be required to moderate certain topics and exclude certain participants. Those conditions represent direct interference with the independence of a civil society convening and an impermissible violation of basic human rights. The Zambian government has publicly stated that the cancellation was motivated by a need to ensure alignment with national values and policy priorities. Conditioning a civil society convening on prior approval of its content or participants is fundamentally incompatible with the rights to freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. It signals that civic space is dependent on state authorization. The timing and manner of the cancellation, just days before the conference was due to begin, have compounded its impact, further preventing participation and undermining trust in Zambia as a host of international convenings. The cancellation also disrupted a wider set of convenings intended to enable open exchange on media freedom and digital rights. RightsCon was to take place alongside the World Press Freedom Day Conference and the Africa Media Convention. Its removal has already altered the conditions under which these events are proceeding. We therefore call on UNESCO and participating states to publicly and unequivocally address the implications of this cancellation for the integrity of the World Press Freedom Day Conference and related convenings. We call on governments, civil society organizations, and other participants present in Lusaka to use their platforms to speak out against restrictions on civic space and to affirm the principles of open and inclusive participation. And we call on international partners and multilateral institutions to make clear that restrictions on civic space, particularly those that condition participation on content or identity, carry consequences for future international engagement, cooperation, and the hosting of global forums. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm now going to open it up for any last questions or comments. When do people have to sign by? So this was so hastily assembled, you're asking us difficult questions.
Do we have time to text back to organizations to do a check-in before we sign off? Do we have like a 12-hour window?
You have it. I think you have a 24-hour window period in order to do that. So speedy, but not within the next hour. Any other questions? Piers.
A comment. It's fascinating to see Thomson Reuters doing these reports, and I'm looking forward to reading them. I've just joined Intel Watch, and one of the things I inherited was 7 reports have just been published about media freedom in Southern Africa by Intel Watch. And we are trying to do webinars on a weekly basis around that. We've done on Lesotho and Mozambique, and on Thursday there's one on South Africa, and then Zimbabwe the week after, and then we'll do the following 3. But it's interesting that there doesn't seem to be adequate collaboration, I think, between those of us that are researching in this field. And given the limitations on donor funds in these things, I mean, I don't know what the answer is. There's no neat answer to this because we compete in this space, let's be honest, for donor funds. But we should, at least on the advocacy front, it seems to me, and on the awareness raising front, try and pull together in terms of finding a common strategy. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that today is evidence that there is important collaboration happening, and as I've indicated to you, but and can't necessarily speak for all the others, but I can say with relative confidence, we'd be thrilled to have those conversations and to have those strategy sessions and to think through how we do this in a better, more effective way. So, yeah, no, you won't have to chase us, honestly. Any other last comments? Okay.
My question is simply what happens next? I mean, after this conference has been cancelled, what's the press back on Zambia? What's the press back on China? I mean, it's well and good to have these discussions here, but if there's no further action taken, whether it's pressure on the South African government to do something, or pressure on the Zambian High Commission to do something, or pressure on any of the international governments to stand up for journalistic freedom, then they kind of win, don't they? Thanks.
Sure. Sure. So obviously this convening, rapidly done, was, as has already been indicated, a form of resistance and opposition to that. We have put out a statement. We are putting out this letter. But I think your question is the right one. What are we going to do more specifically in terms of ensuring that the asks in that letter are complied with? And I think we will have several meetings following this to strategize on how we take that forward. But if anyone else has sort of bright ideas to share with us as to how we might do that, or innovative actions to take, I think we'd all be open to that. Okay. Well, that leaves me with the job of bringing today's proceedings to a close, to thanking all of you again for being here, for a small but I think impactful commemoration of World Press Freedom Day. I think honouring the best of the sector, that we were able to do it in such a short space of time and have so many representatives. Can I just thank then the partner organizations, SANEF, Maxi Africa, Campaign on Digital Ethics, and then to my team at Campaign for Free Expression. And please stay, there are still some snacks and drinks available, but thank you very much for being here, and we will be in touch shortly. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.